You ever spend your whole life building something, only for someone to walk in like they deserve it more than you? That's how it started for me. My name doesn't matter much now. What matters is what I built, what I lost, and what karma did when I finally stopped fighting. I spent 45 years of my life running a small carpentry business. Started with a single worn-out saw and a rented workshop behind an old grocery store. I made furniture, real wood, real craft, the kind people said reminded them of a time when things were built to last. Over the years, that little shop became my world. It wasn't about money. It was about pride, reputation, legacy. When I hit my 60s, I started training a young man named Eric. Bright kid, ambitious, reminded me of myself when I was his age, except maybe a bit hungrier for quick success. He came to me looking for an apprenticeship, said he wanted to learn the art, not just the trade. And for a while, I believed him. He worked hard, I'll give him that. He picked things up fast, too fast maybe. Soon enough, my customers started asking for Eric's touch. I didn't mind. I was proud. I thought maybe this kid would carry on my name when I couldn't hold the hammer anymore. You know, keep the legacy alive. But life has a cruel way of showing you who people really are when you least expect it. It started small. A few missing receipts. A supplier saying I hadn't paid for an order I never placed. Then came the whispers, a few old clients telling me they'd seen Eric's workshop opening across town. Same logo, same style, even my old tagline carved into his signboard. I remember standing outside that shop one morning, my coffee turning cold in my hand, just staring at the name. He'd taken everything, my designs, my customers, my brand, and left me with nothing but a trembling hand and a hollow chest. You know what's funny? I didn't even get angry. Not at first. I just stood there and felt empty, like watching your own shadow walk away and realizing it doesn't need you anymore. He came by once. After that, bold as brass, said he didn't mean for things to get ugly. Offered me a partnership, if you can believe it. Partnership! The nerve of that boy. He looked at me with that smug, confident grin of someone who thinks he's outsmarted the old man. That night I sat alone in the workshop, surrounded by sawdust and silence. Every tool in that room had a story, every dent a memory. I felt decades of work slipping away like dust through my fingers, and that's when I decided I wouldn't fight him. Not in court. Not in public. I wouldn't dirty my name over greed. I'd let time handle him. Because time, my friend, is the sharpest blade of all. What Eric didn't know was that legacy isn't something you can steal. It's something that sticks to your soul, or haunts you when it isn't yours. And so I waited, quietly, patiently, like a storm waiting for the right wind, because karma has its own clock. And I could already hear it ticking. I didn't tell anyone what happened that night, not even my daughter. She would have told me to go to court, to fight, to teach that thief a lesson. But I knew better. The thing about revenge is, it doesn't always have to be loud. Sometimes it's quieter, more patient, like water finding its way through stone. I went back to my workshop every morning like nothing had changed. I kept the doors open, even if there were no customers left to walk through them. The air smelled the same, wood shavings, varnish, and old coffee. But something in me had shifted. My hands moved slower. My heart beat quieter, but I kept working. Because when you've built your life around creation, even heartbreak can't stop you from shaping something out of nothing. Months passed, then years. My shop got smaller, my body weaker, but my reputation, even in its fading years, stayed clean. People remembered my work even if they'd forgotten my name. Then one day, I got a call. A young couple wanted a custom dining table for their new home. I almost said no. These days, even lifting a plank took effort. But something about the way the man spoke reminded me of an old version of myself. So I said yes. They came by a week later. And you wouldn't believe it. The woman was holding a flyer from Eric's workshop. My workshop, the same designs, the same patterns. She said she'd gone to him first, but his prices were outrageous, and his work wasn't what it used to be. I smiled even though something deep inside me trembled. She didn't know who I was, didn't know that the man she was talking to was the ghost of the brand she'd just left behind. I just told her, I'll make you a table that'll last longer than the man who sold you disappointment. When they left, I sat in silence for a long time. That one sentence replayed in my head like a song. I realized that's what Eric had sold to the world. Disappointment. The next few months, I got more calls. Old customers who'd tried Eric and came back saying his tables warped, his chairs cracked, his promises fell apart faster than his glue. The Golden Boy's empire was rotting from the inside, and I hadn't lifted a finger. But karma, she's not done until the lesson sticks. A year later, I heard his business had gone under. Rumors spread that he'd borrowed too much, overpromised, and underdelivered. Suppliers pulled out. Clients sued. The same charm that once built his empire now turned against him when the cracks showed. And then one winter evening, my phone rang again. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity, it's a stubborn thing. It was Eric. His voice didn't sound like the man I once knew. There was no arrogance, no spark, just exhaustion. He said he wanted to meet. Just talk, he said. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Maybe I wanted closure. Maybe I just wanted to see what karma looked like in person. He came by the next morning. I'll never forget how different he looked. His shoulders slumped, his hands fidgeting. The sparkle in his eyes, gone. He walked into the same shop he'd betrayed me in, only now he looked like the lost one. He said, "I'm sorry." Just like that. No excuses, no stories. Just those two words. You know what I told him? "You took something that wasn't yours, Eric. Not my shop, not my money, but my trust." That's what broke, he nodded. And then for a moment I saw the boy I once believed in. He asked if I'd ever forgive him. I told him forgiveness isn't something I give. It's something you earn by living with the weight of what you did. He left quietly after that. Didn't ask for help. Didn't beg, just left. 2 weeks later, I heard he'd taken a job as a furniture salesman, selling mass-produced junk to people who didn't care who built it. I remember sitting back in my chair that night, looking at the table I'd just finished. It was made from oak, strong and stubborn, like me. I ran my fingers over the smooth surface and smiled. Karma didn't have to destroy him, it just had to make him ordinary, and that, my friend, was enough. But that wasn't the end of it, because years later, life gave me one last gift, one that tied everything together in a way even I couldn't have planned, and that I'll tell you in the next part. I didn't think much about Eric after that day. I figured life had already handled him the way it handles people who forget where they came from. I went back to my quiet days in the workshop, the hum of my old radio filling the silence, sawdust floating in the sunlight like memories that refused to leave. Then, one afternoon, a woman came by. She must have been in her 30s, polite but nervous, said her name was Laura, and she was starting a small furniture store downtown. "I heard you used to build pieces that lasted generations," she said. "I want to sell things like that." Real craftsmanship, real soul. Her words hit me harder than she knew. Lasted generations? That used to be my promise. Not just furniture, heirlooms. I told her I'd stopped building for shops years ago, that my hands weren't what they used to be. She smiled and said, maybe they still remember how to make something that matters. So I agreed to make her one table. One last piece. For weeks I poured everything into it. Every dent, every scar, every memory from those years with Eric went into the grain of that wood. I carved patterns I hadn't touched in decades, the kind only someone who'd lived through mistakes could create. When I was done, I stood back and just stared at it. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Laura came to pick it up herself. When she saw it, she went silent for a moment. Then she whispered, This is exactly what I've been looking for." She offered to pay double, but I refused. "Just promise me you'll sell it to someone who'll appreciate where it came from," I said. 2 months later, she called again. The table had sold the same day she displayed it. "The buyer wanted to meet the craftsman," she said. "He said your name brought back memories. That stopped me." "My name?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "He said he used to know you. Eric something." "Eric Doyle," I froze. I don't know what I expected, maybe anger, maybe pride, but what I felt was something stranger. A kind of stillness he wanted to meet. I almost said no. But curiosity, that old troublemaker, got the best of me again. When he walked into the store, I barely recognized him. His hair was gray at the temples now, his suit a little too big, like it belonged to a better version of himself. But his eyes, they weren't empty anymore. They were tired, sure, but they carried something I'd never seen in him before: humility. He looked at the table, then at me. "You made this?" he asked quietly. I nodded. He ran his hand over the surface like it was something sacred. "It's beautiful," he whispered. "It's everything I wanted to build but never could." We stood there in silence. Then he said, "I lost everything trying to be you." That line stuck with me. I didn't know whether to pity him or thank him for finally understanding. He said he'd started volunteering at a carpentry school, teaching kids who couldn't afford college how to work with their hands. "I tell them about you," he said. About what I did. About how pride ruins good men, I didn't say much. I just looked at him and said, "Maybe you finally learned how to build something that lasts." He smiled, just barely. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small. It was the old emblem from my first shop, the one he'd pried off the door years ago when he took over. "The edges were worn, the letters faint. I kept it," he said. "Couldn't throw it away." He placed it on the table and slid it toward me. "I think it's yours again." For a long time, I couldn't speak. My throat tightened, and before I knew it, my eyes were burning. I ran my finger over the emblem and whispered, "You're damn right it is." That night, I hung it back on the wall above my workbench. Same spot it used to be, same quiet pride. But this time it didn't stand for a business. It stood for something else, for endurance, for time, for the truth that legacy isn't what people take from you, it's what stays in your hands when everything else is gone. A few weeks later, Laura told me the table I made for Eric became her store's most requested design. She called it the redemption line. I didn't ask for credit, didn't want it. But when she showed me the sign she'd made for her shop, engraved in simple wood, it read, "Legacy Crafts, built to outlast mistakes." I laughed. Because in a strange, poetic way, even Eric had helped me build that. He never tried to contact me again after that day. I think he didn't need to. We'd both said everything that mattered without saying it. Sometimes I still catch myself running my thumb along that old emblem when I lock up the shop. I think about the boy who betrayed me, the man who broke, and the craftsman who rose again. And every time I whisper to myself, he tried to steal my legacy. But in the end, he helped me prove it could never be stolen. After Eric left that day, the house felt lighter somehow. Not quieter, lighter. Like some ghost I'd been living with for years had finally found the door. For a while, I thought that might be the end of it. The story closed. Karma paid, but life always finds ways to surprise you when you stop expecting anything at all. A month later, Laura stopped by again, this time with someone else. A boy, maybe 19 or 20, skinny, nervous, with sawdust still clinging to his jacket. His name was Daniel. "He's been helping me in the shop," Laura said. "He wants to learn the old way, the kind you taught me." I looked at his hands. Rough, blistered, but steady. The kind of hands that hadn't yet learned fear. I saw myself in him immediately. He told me he'd grown up watching videos of handmade furniture online, but when he tried to copy them, it never felt right. "They're all perfect," he said, "but yours, they look alive." That line, "they look alive," hit me deeper than I could explain, because that was always my secret. I never built perfect things. I built things that breathed, so I told him to come by the workshop a few afternoons a week. Just to watch, maybe sand a few boards. Nothing fancy. He grinned like I'd offered him gold. The first week, he barely spoke. Just watched. His eyes soaked up everything. The rhythm of the saw, the smell of cedar, the way I tested each joint not with a ruler, but by feel. The second week, he started asking questions. Real ones. The kind you can't fake. One afternoon while we were working, he asked, "Did you always know this is what you wanted to do?" I laughed. "No, son. I just knew what I didn't want to do. Live a life that didn't feel like mine." He nodded like he understood, but he was still too young to really know what that meant. Still, I could see the fire starting. The same one I had. Over the months, we built little things together. Boxes, stools, a small coffee table that wobbled just slightly to the left. I didn't correct him. I let him notice it himself. The next week, he came in holding a new one. Perfectly balanced. He just grinned and said, "Guess I found my mistake." That's when I knew he was ready. Then, one evening, he handed me a folded paper. "This is for you," he said. I opened it. It was a flyer for a local design contest, young craftspeople showing their best work. The prize was a scholarship to an old woodworking school in Vermont. "I want to apply," he said, "but only if you'll let me use your emblem." That emblem again. That symbol that had traveled through betrayal, fire, and forgiveness, and somehow kept its meaning. "Why mine?" I asked quietly. He shrugged. "Because I want people to know where I learned what really matters." I felt something twist in my chest. That kind of pride that's too heavy for words. So I said yes. For the next few weeks, we built together. Not teacher and student anymore. Partners. He chose walnut for its deep color. I showed him how to bring out the grain with oil and patience. Every nail, every joint, every stroke of the brush carried a story. Mine, Eric's, his own beginning. When the contest day came, I didn't go. I told him I didn't need to. The work would speak. That night, he called. His voice was shaking. "We won," he said. "First place? They want me to come to Vermont. They said the piece had soul." I just sat there for a while after he hung up. Soul. That's all I ever wanted to build. The next morning, before he left, he stopped by the shop one last time. He handed me a small envelope. Inside was a photo of him standing beside our piece, smiling, holding the ribbon. On the back, he'd written, "For the man who taught me how to build more than furniture." I don't think I've ever cried so quietly in my life. When he left, I looked around the workshop at the wood shavings, the tools older than I was, the faint scent of varnish that never quite leaves. For the first time in decades, I felt peace. Real peace. Because legacy, I realized, isn't something you pass down in a will or a contract. It's something you teach with your hands, your heart, and your forgiveness. And as I ran my fingers over the old emblem one last time, I whispered, "Guess you were never mine to lose after all." Years rolled by. Seasons blurred the same way sawdust settles, quietly, unnoticed, but always leaving its mark. Daniel kept in touch from Vermont. Letters at first, then emails, then photos of his own students standing around fresh-cut tables. Every time he signed off the same way, "Still building with heart," I'd read those words and smile. Because that's what it had always been about. Not revenge, not even legacy, just heart. One autumn evening, I was sitting on my porch watching the leaves surrender to the wind when a white truck pulled up. A delivery man stepped out, carrying a long wooden crate. "You Mr. Harrison?" he asked. "Used to be," I said with a grin. He handed me a small card on top of the crate. I recognized the handwriting right away. "Daniels," it said, "this belongs with you. Thought you'd want to see what your lessons built." I pried open the lid, slow and careful. Inside was a chair, a replica of the one I'd made half a century ago when I was just starting out. But this one was flawless. Every curve, every joint, every grain sang with patience. He'd done what I never could, made perfection breathe. On the back, carved so small you'd almost miss it, was the emblem, my emblem. But beneath it, he'd added something new, for those who remember where they came from. I ran my hand across the surface, and for a long moment I felt every year, every scar, every loss fade into something gentler. It wasn't pride exactly, it was closure, the quiet kind that doesn't need applause. A few months later, I heard that Eric's company had folded. Bad investments, someone said. Maybe bad conscience, I thought. Funny thing about karma, it doesn't always come loudly. Sometimes it just waits for the moment you forget what you took. I didn't gloat. Didn't even smile. I just wished him peace. Because by then, I understood. What you steal never truly stays with you. What you build does. That winter, I decided to close the workshop. My hands weren't as steady, my back wasn't as kind, but before I did, I built one last thing. Not a chair, not a table, a small wooden box. I lined it with cedar and placed inside the first chisel I ever used. The emblem stamp and a folded note that said, "To whoever finds this next, make it your own." Then I locked the door for the last time. Sometimes, when the wind blows just right, I swear I can still hear the echo of the saw, the hum of creation, the heartbeat of a life well built, and that's when I realize Revenge might have started this story, but redemption wrote the ending. So if anyone asks me now whether I regret anything, I tell them this: no, I gave away my legacy, and it came back to me better than I ever imagined. Then I lean back in my chair, close my eyes, and listen to the quiet creak of wood that's older, wiser, and still somehow alive.